dinosaur has to be able to operate a laptop or some sort of radio.
Right.
What are the odds? Oh, look, that was fantastic.
If we find a dinosaur that can control a laptop, we're in trouble. Let's just say that. So we don't want to mess with those either.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have sent this message. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. That's it from me tonight. Up next is Paul Murray Live with an amazing show. Watch this.
Thank you, great man. To the people of the Gold Coast, let's say g'day to Andrew Bolt and the rest of the country. G'day! Welcome to the spiritual home of Paul Murray Live, Queensland, and its capital, the Gold Coast. Fire up! Get in there, everyone! We're here at the Benoa Tavern, and it is going to go off. The Mavericks debate. Sure, the leaders of the two major political parties do their thing tomorrow night. Who cares? This is going to be the main game, and I'm so pleased everyone's here tonight. Of course, Senator Pauline Hanson, Campbell Newman, Bob Catter, Clive Palmer. Give them a round of applause because they're here, they're ready, they're fired up, and it's going to be a ding-dong all night long. Cannot wait. Now, one of the many reasons why this debate matters is because, according to published polls, which we all know are not true, but still, they apparently have between them anywhere between 12 and 20% of the vote nationally. They certainly have that number when it comes to here in Queensland. And put simply, their preferences will decide whether we get ScoMo for 3 more years or whether we get each way Albo for 3 years. That'll be a big part of what we talk about tonight. But of course, it'll be advocacy for their own candidacy and their own parties and different options other than the big two that are on the ballot paper. So, put simply, this is what we need to talk about. We're also going to talk about the reality that if each way gets there with the help of his lefty mates in the Greens, how would they play the game in the Senate or the lower house? All of that tonight on this show. So, let's all say it together. 32 days to save the country from the mad left. That's the mantra. That's the fight. That's the laser-like focus. That is what is in front of us right now. Of course, your options are an idiot who can't answer yes-no questions, an even more dangerous lefty idiot in Adam Bant, Christina Keneally, who is out of the COVID cave. I'll get to that in a moment or two's time. Penny Wong taking on China? I don't think so. And how do we feel about Lydia Thorpe getting even more power? Well, of course, the big news today was that the Labor Party campaign, it's back on track, guaranteed an election victory just like it was in 2019, because you know who's here to help? Christina from Scotland Island. Now, this, of course, was her contribution in the final days of the 2019 campaign, playing with puppies with, of course, Prime Minister Bill Shorten. He's, of course, going for a second to, oh, that's right, it didn't work. Well, unsurprisingly, it's probably not going to work again. But Christina Keneally, she's got rid of the woo flu, and she is lying for Australia.
And the choice is this, between an honest Albo and a sneaky Scott. A Scott Morrison, you know how you know he's lying? Because his lips are moving.
Please keep helping. Please keep helping. Now, of course, Christina Keneally, of course, has a whole play here where she's going from Scotland Island because apparently the Northern Beaches wasn't white enough for her. And she decided, of course, to try to slide in and become a passionate immigrant story in the southwest of Sydney. It's all part of her plan to fail up, of course, from being an unsuccessful premier to an unsuccessful senator, an unsuccessful frontbencher, till eventually she's the leader of the Labor Party, the Prime Minister, the Governor-General. She becomes the Pope, the President, and then her true job, of course, of being a weather girl in Las Vegas. All we are just little stops on the road for Queen KK. As for Albo, what he was trying to do today was, well, take the lowest road to the highest office. Because he can't answer yes-no questions, it is all about lying now. The lies get bigger and wilder each and every day, and we've still got 4.5 weeks to go. Number one lie that Each Way told today. In an interview with my mate Neil Breen on 4BC, he claimed that in 2013, when he was the Deputy Prime Minister to the oh-so-amazing Karen Rudd, that they turned the boats back, despite the fact it's not true.
Offshore processing, of course, began when I was Deputy Prime Minister back in 2013. We turned back the boats. We have settlement in third countries.
It's a lie. Now, while they came up with some sort of 5 minutes to midnight Band-Aid solution when it came to offshore processing, they didn't turn back any boats, a point that was made to Each Way today by our great reporter, Jonathan Lee.
Our plan is very clear. Offshore processing began when I was Deputy Prime Minister in 2013. We turned back boats. We have settlement in third countries. In third countries. Now, you were Deputy Prime Minister from June 26, 2013 through to September of that year. Now, between that period, some 3,960 people arrived illegally in Australia on 48 boats. You didn't turn back the boats.
No.
Is that not accurate?
No.
And what confidence do people have that you will turn back the boats?
Middle stump from the Sky News reporter. A stone-cold lie. And then there's the one, of course, that they support Operation Sovereign Borders.
We support Operation Sovereign Borders. We've said we support the offshore processing system. We've said we support boat turnbacks. We've said we support settlement in third countries. There is a difference that we have over temporary protection visas.
Each Way is telling a lie. Because as you know, Operation Sovereign Borders isn't just the name of something that you order on Uber Eats. It actually requires all three things to be done. Jim Molan, who of course was the bloke who was turning back the boats, he told this to Peter Cridland last night, that if you support Operation Sovereign Borders, you support it all, not some of it. It's not a buffet.
Operation Sovereign Border consists of three factors, and you cannot say that you support Operation Sovereign Borders unless you support all three.
Oh, and if you're one of the people on Twitter who's trying to turn around and say, oh, this is like a 2001 issue, no one cares about this anymore. Jim Molan on how many people with a fistful of dollars are waiting to pay people smugglers in Indonesia.
There are 8,000 people, as we know, 8,000 Afghans waiting in Java to come to Australia. The people smugglers, Peter, as you know better than most people, are watching every single thing that we say.
So the boat stuff, lies every day. And then there is the massive lie that the government is planning to move particularly old age pensioners onto the cashless welfare card. We talked about this a bit in the past couple of days. It is a stone cold lie. It is absolute garbage. It is not true. I'm sorry, I've got to say it. It is bullshit. Now, this particular lie is being pushed in part by letterbox dropping that is going into old age pensioners' homes, particularly on Bribie Island here in Queensland. That's what the leaflet looks like. And just in case you don't believe me, lefties who hate watching the program tonight, I don't care, ratings count in both directions. The ABC did a fact check on this and they call it a lie. Now, by the way, the media wants to call this an election scare. It's not an election scare, it's an election lie. And it happens all day, every day from these people. And then there's the third big lie that Albo was trying to push today, and it goes back to his promise about cutting your power prices.
Our modelling very clearly out there shows that households will benefit by $275 on average.
Well, the truth is that his modelling is done on the other side of the beer coaster when Rudd came up with the national broadband network. Because the reality is that to get to whatever dreamland they want to get us to, you have to spend billions of dollars physically building the infrastructure. As I've told you before, he has a $20 billion promise for a $1 trillion problem. And it's one that the government is seizing upon, suggesting the power bills that they could end up going up by more than $500. But I talked about the new change when it comes to Albo and his tactics. Now, can I predict one thing here? Labor people always win the People's Forum, and when inevitably he does, and if he doesn't, he's dead, right? Shorten won the last People's Forum, OK? They're important, but they're not legally binding when it comes to the election. He will win that People's Forum because he'll be able to continue to lie as many times as he can in front of those people. But what's really important here is that all of this is part of a new strategy from Labor. One that they will say, Newspoll didn't move, he hasn't made a mistake, it's all back on track. So let's be nice and clear about Albo's brand new way of campaigning is. No more detailed announcements each and every day. Because remember, he can't be trusted with yes, no questions. Hide behind Jim Chalmers, who ends up doing most of the heavy lifting in these press conferences, because even if he's not telling the truth, he can answer a yes, no question. All scare all the time, because that seems to have worked for 3 years. And this is a tactic I'm going to get in trouble for talking about, but I owe you the truth. One of the ways that political campaigns manage the media is to say, we'll give you a one-on-one interview with insert the candidate. So that way, the people don't ask the tough questions. So watch the people who get one-on-one interviews with Albo, and then watch how their questioning of Albo changes from when they were no chance of sitting down and having a conversation. Oh, and amazingly, he's knocked off for the second day in a row at lunchtime. He really is the Aussie Joe Biden. So when it comes to the big questions that Albo won't answer, why are you lying to people who are pensioners? Why are you lying about boats? Will KK be on the borders or in charge of the budget? And who'll really be in charge, the Mean Girls or the Greens? Who will pay more tax? Why do you keep saying that climate is a bigger threat than China? Who's really going to pay for your 43% climate cut by 2030? Who will be the Defence Minister? And before we introduce our great panel, it's DJ Albo time!
Hey, buddy. Now, play that one where you were an economic advisor to Bob Hawke.
Became an economic policy advisor to the Hawke government.
What about how you're going to take more questions than ScoMo, but then you ran away?
I'll be taking more of your questions.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Why aren't you taking all the questions like you agreed to?
Answered the job seeker stuff.
So we're not taking your questions now, Mr. Albanese, like you pledged.
Get the chuppa chumps ready because it's time to talk tax.
Will you increase tax? You won't be increasing taxes to pay back debt.
You won't increase taxes.
I don't know that you're answering the question. It's pretty.
Yes, I am.
Is it a yes or a no?
I am absolutely.
Will you be increasing taxes?
We will be announcing our measure on multinational tax evasion.
Mean Girls.
There's a cultural problem with senior women within the ALP.
No.
Not that you're aware of.
No. No.
Put your hands up in the air. Put your hands up in the air. He's talking boats, boats, boats.
Do you remain committed to Operation Sovereign Borders? And if so, do you support the retention of temporary protection visas?
Yes.
We don't support temporary protection visas.
Time to square off with a partner to talk unemployment.
What's the national unemployment rate?
National unemployment rate at the moment is, I think it's 5.4. Sorry, I'm not sure what it is.
And bring it home by ripping off a fake American president.
Australia, we have serious challenges to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
Unfortunately, Tony Abbott is not the least bit interested in fixing anything.
Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it.
He's only interested in two things.
He is interested in two things.
Making Australians afraid of it.
Making you afraid of it.
And telling them who's to blame for it.
And telling you who's to blame for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for DJ Albo. Did we enjoy DJ Albo? You want that every night? We'll get plenty of it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the people that will help decide the election, and they join us right now here on the Gold Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put it together for Clive Palmer, the Senate leader of the United Australia Party, Bob Katter from Katter's Australia Party, the Queensland leader of the Liberal Democrats, Campbell Newman, and the leader of One Nation, Pauline Hanson. Guys, thank you very much for coming along. My thanks very much to Peter Gleeson for being able to herd everyone and get them here. I do appreciate it. We'll give you a chance at the end of it all to give the party spiel. Here's how the plan goes. Somebody's going to ask a question. You get 90 seconds to answer it. We'll then give a minute for everyone to argue the answer, and then we move on to the next question. Now, as important as you all are, and you are very important, I want to get through as many questions as possible, so let's try and keep it to time. But for the highlight reel, you can fight if you want for an hour. It's your decision. All right. Pleased to see that the very first question that we got was from the tallest, thinnest bloke we could find. And I'm pleased to say it's Jared. Jared, your question is for Mr. Palmer. Let's start off with him.
Other than the issue of national debt, why aren't you preferencing the Liberals? You're a big reason as to why they did so well at the last election, particularly in Queensland. So why would you run the risk of giving Labor a leg up, particularly in the industry you're in? And to the others, if this comes down to a hung parliament and the major has to form a majority, who will you go with and why?
All right, Clive, we start with 90 seconds on you and we'll move it around.
Well, I guess we see a great backflip by the Liberal Party in going for net zero in Queensland. We see hundreds of thousands of people employed in the coal industry, which they've abandoned the policy they had last time. So that's a good reason for not preferencing the Liberals. But moreover, we see that the whole political class, Liberal, Labor and the Greens, has deserted the Australian people, not going for policies that are good for this country. And so we think all of them are as bad as each other. And as Senate Leader, I can tell you the 6 Senate preference places in Queensland, the United Australia Party will not have either Liberal, Labor or the Greens. We believe we need a real change in this country, and we think we're 1 minute to midnight. And you really can't say for other than the debt. The debt's over $1 trillion. You know, Shorten was aiming at 900 million. They've beaten Shorten's goal by going over $1 trillion. And that's the real elephant in the room that nobody's addressing but our party.
Also, when you talk about Senate preferencing, lower house though, if there are 10 candidates, at some point you have to make a decision between 8, 9 and 10. Have you made that decision?
No, we haven't, because we don't know who the candidates are in the House of Representatives at the moment. It closes next week, then we'll have the nominations. But there are some people we will preference, for example, that stood with Craig Kelly in Parliament, that crossed the floor with him, that sponsored his bills, etc., that stood up against the mandatory vaccinations and things in this country. So those people will receive our preferences, I'd imagine. But Craig Kelly's responsible for the House of Reps, I'm responsible for the Senate, and I won't preference any of the bastards.
All right. Bob, we'll give everyone a chance to answer it on preferences. Bob.
On preferences. We have never, ever shown preferences. We believe the voter knows best. So we have one side of the card for Liberal, one side of the card for Labor. You make up your own mind. But, Paul, if you think that I have some, preconceived adherence to the LNP, I stood and watched as every one of my rural industries bled to death under deregulation. And I can be very specific. The dairy area that I represent had the highest suicide rate in Australia 3 years after deregulation. That was my party, and I know all about it because I was in the party when that was done. And I just have never, ever lived with the shame that I had to live with then. So I don't start off with any preferences. In 4.5 years, I defied people to tell me anything that this government has done to deserve to be re-elected. And I agree with Clive. Something they've done, which is absolutely bloody awful, is to have spat upon the coal industry. There are only 2 incomes that this country has now, is iron ore and coal. You've sent every other industry overseas. All you got left is those 2 industries. And you're going to close down the coal industry. Well, either you're lying when you say 2050, you're either lying or you're going to bankrupt this country, one of the 2. Now, if you think... Thank you. But if you think, from what I've said, and venting my fury and the pain that I had to take through all those years, if you think I'm going for the Labor Party, well, my homeland was utterly destroyed by the deregulation of the wool industry and the sell-off of the railways. That a Labor Party would sell the railways and the electricity industry to the highest bidder. Can you believe it?
All right.
Can you believe it?
Campbell, I want to give you all a chance to deal with the preference question first.
Look, a couple of points on this. Firstly, the voters at the end of the day are the ones who decide. Parties only make recommendations. I'm here because I am so dismayed with the party that I was involved in since 1975, and particularly a Prime Minister who I don't believe espouses the values, and we were all in the Liberal or National parties in the past. So we're here in one respect because we're upset about the betrayal of those Liberal Party or National Party values. So I particularly agree with Bob in what he said about coal. You know, a Prime Minister who once brought a lump of coal into the Parliament has actually set in motion the betrayal of the coal miners of central Queensland and indeed the Hunter Valley. But we've then got Anthony Albanese saying that he supports coal. Well, you know, knock me over with a feather, mate. That's BS too, because he's used some language there which I think sets up the bureaucratic repudiation of future coal projects. So in summary, I don't want Anthony Albanese to be PM. If it comes down to the wire, I will always back the coalition. I'll be honest about that, upfront about that. But you know what? Don't believe this stuff from the major parties, particularly Morrison, that a vote for a minor party or independent is a wasted vote. It's not. It's the only way that we'll get new blood.
Change.
It's the only way you'll get change. It's the only way you get blood into the parliament. Yeah, Bob.
Right. Yeah. Pauline, we've talked a lot about preferences, but I want to give you the fair shake as well.
Look, I put my money where my mouth is, and I've tried to educate the public that they own their preferences. It's not the political parties, it's only a recommendation, and I believe that we need to teach in the educational system how the voting system works. A lot of people don't understand our voting system, and that's where we need to start educating the young voters coming through. Now, my attitude is a lot of these people, and when I saw the moderates cross the floor on the religious freedom bill, that really irritated me. I see the Liberal Party, the supposed to be the Conservative Party, being taken to the left, and I don't want to see that. We have to have a democracy here where we do have the true, whether you're on the left or the right of politics. I will admit I'm more the Conservative side, but I think I'm the middle of the road, and I think there's a balance for both to be represented on the floor of Parliament to represent the needs of many Australians. But if it came down to my decision, if we have, whether it's a coalition, if it's hung Parliament in the lower house, or whether it's a Labor Greens government, I will not support Labor Greens. I've worked with them for the last 6 years on the floor of Parliament, and where the Greens will have this country, they will destroy us. We'll end up with a third world bloody nation. We will not, and I will not, I cannot, and I don't. I have seen the Liberal Party, and yes, I've had to work with them and I've had to rein them in, and some of their values are not representing the Australian people. And that both of them, you know, that's where you have the crossbench. We are very, you know, constructive. They've worked well with us and we with them to ensure we've got good legislation for the people of Australia and this country.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Jared. Jason, step on down. G'day, Jason. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. How you doing?
Excellent. Thanks for coming along. All right, let's say this question's for Campbell Newman. Go for it.
Much has been made about China's increasing belligerence towards us over the past 2 years or so, and the dramatic souring of our relationship. Where do you think, in your best estimate, is our relationship going with China over the next 5 to 10 years? And what plans, if any, do you have in office, if you were in office, to deal with this relationship?
So 90 seconds for Campbell for the response, and then we'll argue it over the next minute.
Sure. Well, look, I'm not one who buys that this notion that the Labor Party putting out that somehow the Australian government or Morrison or others have actually created this situation. It has occurred because we've reached a position where a Chinese Communist Party regime is actually on the march in terms of what they did in Hong Kong, what they've done in the South China Sea, what they've done with the Uyghurs. And I do think it's important that we make our views known and we stand up for our Australian values, our democratic values. So everything I think that we've done on that score has been correct. The fact that they've then pushed back in the way they have is something we've copped. We've copped it sweet. And sadly, some of our rural exporters and the like and other exporters have copped that. Where do I see it going? Well, it's like this. It's time for Australia to actually really bolster its defence forces and have a degree of self-reliance that sadly, after 9 years, almost 9 years of a coalition government, we don't have. A lot of talk about missiles now, about frigates, about submarines, but there hasn't been the delivery. Final word is, if a government can't deliver dams and irrigation schemes in Queensland after 9 years of talking about it, I have little faith that they have the mettle to actually deliver the subs, the frigates and those missile systems, and that's what we need.
OK, all right, we'll start with Clive and around for a minute.
Well, I've dealt with the Chinese a lot, and I can tell you they're a ruthless bunch, and they're hell-sent on getting our resources. But our politicians are just as weak. We actually have a preeminent position in iron ore in the world. 80% of their manufacturing depends on our iron ore. We have 80% of the market. They've invested $50 trillion in the manufacturing industry in China so that they can dominate the world, export to Europe and export to the United States. Now, what we need is a 15% export licence on our iron ore, which will repay the debt for us without Australians having to repay it. And if they don't pay it, they don't get our iron ore.
Bob and Pauline on the China question. Bob, Pauline?
I've said publicly again and again and again 4 million times that you firstly need a secure essential services. We have about 3 days' supply of fuel. If they embargo our fuel, we have 3 days' supply. Now, that's essential services. Someone sold 40% of the electricity industry in Australia to China. There is a name for that sort of thing, and I think you all know what the name is when you sell. But if they close 3 power stations, you're on intermittent power. All these greeny geniuses, well, I hope you can get the sunshine to shine overnight. But the second thing is missiles. You know, you're absolutely right, Campbell. There needs to be a missile fortress war. You try and get through that. In 4.5 years, they haven't built one missile. 3 weeks before the election, they're going to build missiles. But there's a lot of things you're going to do. You promised me you were going to build dams. I don't see any dams out there. And thirdly, and I don't apologise for anyone, every kid in this country, every boy in this country in secondary school should have access to a rifle and know how to use it. And the reason for that is the Ukraine.
Pauline, just about China.
Yeah. The growing power of China really concerns me greatly, and if we don't take it seriously, we're fools. I've been warning about this for many, many years about the growth of China. They want to be the world leading power throughout the whole world and control, and that's been evident with it. Our governments, whether it's Liberal or Labor over the years, have allowed them to get too much ownership of our land, our agricultural land, ownership of our assets and that type of thing. Well, that needs to stop. We need
about their power, but their belligerence, their growing belligerence, and not of the Chinese people, the Chinese government, I'm saying.
Yes,
I'm not
I know, but a lot
here,
of the companies that come here are actually being bought up by the individuals, and the Chinese government actually owns it. We should be stopping that, the ownership of our homes and agricultural land in this country. We've seen what's happened in the Solomon Islands. This is there moving their power throughout it, and we need to build up our defences because we are going to have to be in that position. We can't defend them by ourselves. We need our allies to actually fight with us and protect our homeland, because I have assurance today, further down the track, they have got their eyes on Australia for the resources and for the land that we have, the ever expanding population that they have.
Right.
And we have to be strong about this and stop kowtowing to them and whatever they want.
So do you think the next 5 or 10 years is going to get worse or better?
Look,
that's cheeky, but okay.
You don't have
what's happened in the South Seas does concern me. If you can't understand what's happened in the Solomon Islands and they control the Coral Sea, well, then we have a problem with moving cargo because that's the trading.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much, mate. I do appreciate it. That's very good. Thank you. Give it up for Jason and his 17 questions, but I appreciate it. Well done. No, not a problem. John, g'day, mate. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming along. Thank you for having me on the GC. Shani, can we move you, please? All right. Now, let's say Bob Cutter. What's your question for him?
Well, I've actually got a question for Bob and all the others, but I know Bob's already mentioned this question and he's a full supporter, but I put it to all of you. That are you committed to ensuring that the major infrastructure projects of building dams in Queensland are a priority if you get into office? If yes, would you reconsider the revised Bradfield scheme proposed by Sir Leo Halsher?
All right. Well, we know where you are on dams, but feel free to underline it for us, Bob.
In 30 years, we haven't built a dam, but the genius Queensland ALP government built one and then pulled it down. Now they're going to rebuild it again. I mean, for an exercise. But look, please listen to me on this. Please listen to me on this. The dream of the Australian people is to take the water in my electorate where it rains all the time, 100-inch rainfall in Tully and Babinda, it never stops raining, take a little tiny bit of that and send it out to a beautiful, magnificent inland plain of Queensland and produce from it, you know, a dream world that we could, like California did.
OK, Clive, I want to get you on dams.
Well, first I'd say that we are a third world country now, but we don't realise it because we've got such a high debt. So I think we've got to come up with a scheme to get rid of the debt so we can get the funding and the money to build more dams. But first of all, we've got to deal with the debt because the debt won't give us any funds to do anything. So that's our first priority, because you said priority. My priority is to make Australia independent financially so we can do all the things and upgrade our infrastructure.
Pauline, how do we deal with water? What's your plan for Queensland?
I've been talking about water for the last 25 years, and it's been my priority to actually be drought-proof. We've got to drought-proof ourselves. I've actually been talking about the Bradfield scheme on the floor of Parliament. It's been boo-hooed by the National Party, not interested, the Libs aren't interested. SMEC, which is the Snowy Mountain Engineering Corporation, they actually did a survey on it. It cost $20 billion to actually build the project. It's probably more now than what it was just a few years ago. But instead of the original scheme of running the water down into Lake Eyre, bring it down through central Queensland, open up those for agricultural land, then bring it down into Murray-Darling, sort out the problems there and flow it through to those communities.
Campbell, you know this from both sides. Well, look, how do we get it done?
Look, the light bulb moment for me came back when Brisbane and South East Queensland were facing that terrible drought back in the late 2000s, where Peter Garrett stopped the building of a dam, the Traviston Dam, on environmental grounds. We were down to 15% water, ladies and gentlemen, 15% for the nation's third largest city. And I say to you, if you can't build a dam to provide the sustenance of life, where can you build a dam anywhere in Australia? The problem is the Federal Environment Act, and despite talking about this for 10 years, neither Julia Gillard, Kevin Rudd, or even the coalition governments have done anything about it. They've talked and talked and talked about building dams. Nothing's happened because there will always be a blade of grass. There will also always be a snail, a frog, you name it, a marsupial, a cuddly one at that, but that will stop a dam. So we need to deal with the legislation. And I back the Nathan Dam, I back Hell's Gate, and I want to see these projects delivered. And I'll be fighting for that. That's one of the big things I will fight for if I'm a senator for Queensland.
You want another crack, Pauline?
People have to know this, and the big problem is that when John Howard separated water from land in 2004, the problem is that they've actually privatised a lot of the water. A lot of the water in Australia, 20% of our water is actually foreign owned. We've moved on the floor of Parliament to have a national register who owns our water. They've all backed against it. No one voted with One Nation on that bill. So the Nationals, the Liberal and the Labor don't want you to know who owns the water licences in this country.
And Clive, just on debt and this idea about paying it down, and there's not a person who doesn't agree with that as a priority. How long would it take to get to zero before you start being able to deal with other priorities, or it's got to get to 750, 500, 250? What's the number?
Well, on our modelling, we think 20 years will repay the debt back and probably give us an extra $300 billion by charging a 15% export licence to the importers of our iron ore, and they would be paying it, not the Australians. But what it does immediately, it brings our balance sheet into balance, if you like. We've got a debt here, but we've got a way of repaying it. So that opens up the capacity of the government to do so many more things straight away.
Thank you very much.
Can I just have
Bob, yeah.
this really important point to make, right? There's nearly $200 billion a year going to superannuation. None of that is going into development, as Clive's talking about, Campbell and Pauline are talking about. None of that's going to development. More than half of it is just going to the stock market, which the great John Maynard Keynes described as a roulette wheel. I describe it as a Ponzi scheme. You keep jamming $100 billion a year, but once upon a time, 60% of that went into government securities for development. The money is there for development now, and instead it's going into speculation.
Well, there's $3.5 trillion in superannuation. It goes to $9.5 trillion in 2040, and there's $1 trillion at the moment invested in American shares and European shares, which can be brought home straight away. When you invest in superannuation, the government makes it tax-free, yet we get tax-free money and it gets sent offshore and we have no benefits in Australia.
But here's more than half those shares, he's dead right, more than half those shares.
Campbell, about the plan.
But here's the problem right now. Between now and 26 financial year, the debt of this country is going to go up by 37%. We're in a boom, a mini boom. And even if you're a Keynesian sort of economist believer, you don't run deficits, large deficits, 80 billion this coming financial year, in a boom. You're actually meant to cut back. The trouble is, if we want to deal with this debt issue, we need to actually stop this crazy spending, which is actually creating inflation. hurting people's cost of living, and it started prior to the Ukraine. That is the biggest issue affecting people right now, inflation, and it's because of government spending and loose monetary policy. And we're the only people who are talking about cutting spending and actually reducing taxes, which is really important to stimulate the economy.
Because, Pauline, I mean, again, my observation about the Senate is, remember, this was a Senate at one point in time that got rid of the carbon tax but kept the compensation for the carbon tax. It was one of the deals Xenophon was able to get going. It's one thing to be able to be in the Senate and advocate for these things, but how are we going to be able to get an understanding across broader politics here that there's only two ways to solve this: cut what you spend or increase what you tax?
That's right. There's only two ways to raise money for it. But what you actually need is that this government spending, what's going on at the moment, all these arts programs. And I'll tell you, a fellow got $1.8 million for his Lego to take it around the country and show his Lego. And another fellow, someone else got $1.1 million to about the Beatles band doing a tour around Australia. This is where your money's going. Bureaucrats are on $600,000 a year. It's just absolutely ridiculous, the amount of money that's been going out the door. The waste of money is atrocious. That needs reining in. But then again, we also need to look at our resources. We look at the mining. They actually pay a lot of money to the states in royalties. But we have so much gas off the northwest shelf, we don't get the money out of it. We're the largest exporter of LNG gas throughout in the world, yet we only make about $300 million out of $54 billion export, and Qatar is the second largest, which pulls in $26 billion a year. So go figure. This is because the government is not utilising our resources so that we, the people, get back.
All right, let's get another question here. Liz, lovely to meet you. Looking great, darling. All right, what's a question you have for the group?
Well, I'm not going to ask them about the unemployment rate, but I am going
5.4.
Why aren't all parties more vocal about the bullying of the late Senator Kitching by the Labor Party mean girls? How can Labor be allowed to just push this under the carpet?
All right, Pauline, we'll start with you.
I didn't hear the question clearly.
It was about the bullying of Senator Kitching by the mean girls. Why aren't you all more vocal about that, or continue to be more vocal?
Sorry, I don't think I could have been any more vocal than what I have been over the few years talking about that. She was a close friend of mine. I was terribly distraught over her death.
Very quickly.
Sorry?
It stopped very quickly, whereas the Labor Party continued to go on, and it's just been pushed under the carpet. And somebody that has been bullied by a politician, it matters to me.
Well, you're holding a Mean Girls thing there. Who do you think put that out? I did, right? So I haven't forgot about
what does Mean Girls mean to you about the way the Labor Party works or Australian politics works?
Oh, look, what it means is blatant hypocrisy, because, you know, they are often out there, very often out there, sort of beating up generally conservative politicians and commentators about supposed treatment of women and the like. But when they've got it in their own backyard, they don't want to deal with it, and they didn't deal with this properly. I'd met Senator Kitching once a few years ago. Lisa and I met her, and then I always watch with interest her contributions to our national debate. I thought she was fantastic, and she deserved better than what she got. And, you know, I think Albo really failed on this one, and, you know, he really just swept it.
So, Bob, what did you think about the Mean Girls situation and the way an alternative Prime Minister handled it?
Well, I know what it's like to be bullied, you know. I fought against all those deregulations, the destruction of all those rural industries in Australia. Our cattle numbers are down about 20%. Our sheep numbers are down 72%. Our cane industry is down about 20%. Our dairying's down 20%. Oh, geez, they were wonderful initiatives you took, weren't they? Completely destroyed agriculture in this country. But I understand what it's like to be bullied. I was bullied at school. It taught me how to fight. And it taught me how to fight good. So I thank those people that bullied me. And it was just a shame that there weren't a few people that stood up and fought back on her behalf. And that is very typical of Parliament in Canberra. You step out of line, you're finished. And that's why the future of Australia depends upon the four people sitting up here.
Clive, about the Mean Girls, what it told you about
Well, I guess I've been involved in politics for 50 years, Paul, and it's no surprise to me that the Labor Party are made up of thugs that will do anything to crawl over each other to get power. So it wasn't a shock to me what happened to Senator Kitching. And I think the best thing we can do for her is to look at some of the things that she believed in and trying to stabilise our country. So I think, while we've got to deal with bullying as a general thing, we can't betray the rest of the Australian people, because what we're facing at the moment is increased interest rates and home loans, which will affect the whole community, a very big debt. And we don't want to distract from that debate, especially in election time, because these things are very important for the Australian community.
I just feel it needed to be investigated.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Take a breather, guys. Round of applause. I appreciate you guys being here. Plenty more live from the GC next on Paul Murray Live.
Paul Murray Live, proudly brought to you by Visy, turning your old boxes into new boxes.
I've got a brand new show coming to Sky News Australia.
Everyone's got something to say about Piers Morgan, the broadcaster every channel wants, but he's too afraid to hire.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
A showman and a journalist with a penchant for Twitter spats.
It's true, I do love a good spat.
Piers Morgan Uncensored starts next Tuesday.
Freedom of speech is a hill that I am prepared to die on.
Only on Sky News Australia.
At Carpet Call, we're the experts in all things flooring. We're the experts in carpet, experts in timber, hybrid and laminate flooring, experts in DIY home improvements, experts in fashion rugs, experts in floor care, even experts in Australian-made blinds and shutters. So, for all your flooring and window covering needs, call Carpet Call now, the experts in the trade.
Call Carpet Call.
The experts in the trade.
Now there'll be no more fear and the road is clear. The sky is clear and grey. I know what I'll do. Gonna put my faith in a party true. A team that knows a way to fight for me now every day. And that's my kind of party. The United Australia Party. Yeah, that's my kind of party. The United Australia Party. So sound the starting gun. You know we've just begun to make Australia great. We got it in us, mate. United Southern Sons. Won't throw away my vote.
That has changed the course of Australia's history.
Won't let us bob around, we're gonna hit the ground. We have the antidote. I know what I'll do. Gonna put my faith in a body
devoted to making sure the government of Australia changes, to make sure a new government's formed that can give help to the people and stop what's happening in this country.
And that's my kind.
The best life is a family. The best country is Australia. Love Australia.
Yeah, that's my kind of party. The United Australia Party.
Freedoms that we enjoy, we have to protect them, cherish them, and handle them for the next generation to be the same.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
You've dived into the deep end. You only get one chance to do any of this. You've got to do it.
It's been hard to get there, but it's worth it in the end.
The new season of Grand Designs Australia begins Thursday, May 5 on Lifestyle.
Welcome back here to the Gold Coast, where we are doing the Mavericks pub test, where tonight we're having one heck of a conversation with the people who will shape the future of the country. Of course, we're here in conversation with Campbell Newman, with Pauline Hanson, with Bob Catter and with Clive Palmer. A question from a fat bloke who's got a microphone in his hand to all of you. Politics can get very aggressive, very ugly, and sometimes things get said
about yourself or about each other. So I want to give you all the opportunity to respond to something that either you've heard said by campaigns about each other. You're trying to compete in a pretty fertile space. So let me put it to you this way. Clive, what's the biggest lie that any of these three people have told about you?
Well, I personally don't think politics should be personally, Paul. People say things about me every day, and it's just like water off a duck's back. I think what's more important is what we stand for, the policies we've got, than the people. I know Pauline is someone that served Queensland faithfully for many years and done a great job. I know Campbell Newman has done a great job, and so has Bob Catter. We've got to realise that public service has no reward, it's only history. But if you've done something that helps the community even a little bit along the way, then you get satisfaction out of them. So all of us as Queenslanders, as Australians, have got to be grateful for people serving the public. So I wouldn't criticise any of them.
The bait is on the hook. Campbell, what's the biggest lie any of these people have told about you?
I just want to. I don't want to sort of revisit too much history because this is meant to be about the news. But Clive, you've said some pretty tough stuff about me, and I've reciprocated with shot and shell. And I don't think we need to repeat it. But it's been pretty full ball.
We're exchanging preferences now.
Oh yeah, we are. I mean, we're all. It's all is good. You know, that was the war. Now that was then.
Bob?
Now for the and why Clive? Because this election is too important for us to be fighting each other. It is too important, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not, that is why we've reconciled our differences.
Good stuff. Bob, I'm just asking for a friend.
But the worst thing I ever copped was Pauline had attacked me and then she said she loves me, and that was real bad, Paula.
Pauline, are you going to play Kumbaya or are you going to call out here?
No, we kissed and made up on that trip that we did through Queensland.
Oh!
Hey, listen, I haven't got to worry about these 3 years.
Trouble.
I've copped it for the last 25, 26 years from the major political parties. I've been named everything. I've been jailed. I've been everything done to me, and I'm still here fighting for the people of Australia.
Good stuff. Well done. That was good. Damn it, they didn't take the bait. All right, let's get another question up here, because there's a few that we want to get to here, including we've got Stuart, I think, is the next one. Stuart, come on down, mate. Hello, mate. What's your question? And hopefully you'll do better than I just did.
Oh, all right. My question is about Albonomics. We see that Albo's got a problem recalling numbers from time to time. How do you think the country would go with Albo in charge of the economy? And it's to the panel.
All right, so let's just go left to right. Clive?
Well, I think it would go worse than it is at the moment, but it's hard when you think it can't get much worse, because really we've got a 6 months budget, and then we'll get the real budget and you'll find out how bad Australia's is. But Albo hasn't got the experience, the capability to deal with billions of dollars and all that sort of stuff. Fortunately, in my life, I've been involved in that sort of business. So I've got a bit of an insight to see how we can change and reorganise some of these things. But Albo comes from a traditional union background, and he hasn't had a job in real life. That's the reality.
Bob, would you trust Albo with the economy?
Well, quite frankly, I wouldn't trust anyone in the federal parliament with the economy. But, you know, you can rubbish Pauline Hanson, so she's fish and chip lady. She had to balance a budget. She had to take risks in business, right? She knows what it's like. And, you know, the most humble people, I think, would be far more qualified than the people that I work with. But the three great men of Queensland history, this was a Cinderella state until Les Thies came along, drained the swamp here and created the Gold Coast. He built the Snowy Mountains, built the 26th greatest engineering wonder of the world, and he created the coal industry out of nothing. But he wouldn't have accomplished those things if it hadn't been for Leo Hilcher and Bajocki Peterson. Those are the trio that did it. And they never paused. When they had a decision to make, they made it. We built a dam, a major dam, every year. We opened up a huge coal mine or other mine every single year. We built a giant tourist resort every single year for 20 years. Now, the current government, the reason that these four people are here, the current government hasn't done one of those things. nor do they intend to do it, right? I mean, to say 6 weeks before an election campaign, you're going to build missiles. The country needs 200,000 missiles. We probably haven't got 200, but we can't find out because all of our information in the armed forces, and your great colleague and friend exposed this, is in the hands of a company called Global Switch, which is owned by China. So I can't find out where the submarines are, except if I go through the Chinese government. They know where all our submarines are. And you wonder why we have a passion against what is. And if you're criticising Albo, well, I mean, I don't really know that there's going to be a great deal of difference. It'll probably be worse, particularly in the issue of China, in my opinion.
Campbell, Albonomics, would you trust him with the economy?
Well, that's the problem we need to deal with that Clive's been talking about. I've been talking about particularly. There's the debt record, red for Labor, blue for the coalition. Although it's a bit high, I'll admit it has come down a little bit in terms of the latest projections. Going up by 37% in the next 4 or 5 years. Now, Albo will be worse because he has this view that you can, for example, dismantle a perfectly good electricity supply system, spend billions of dollars to try and go to renewables and somehow turn your back on reliable baseload power and not even consider nuclear power, which we support. We support removing the ban on that. The problem is this country should be going forward in the way that Bob has just said. We can. We just need to get government out of the way. We need to remove red tape. We need to deal with the environmental legislation. We need to back Australians, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, to get up and have a go. We need lower tax rates, and we actually need to powerhouse our way out of the mess that I just showed you. That's the secret here. It won't be solved by government. Governments don't actually create jobs. They talk about jobs. The only jobs they ever created are in the public sector. And by the way, 1 in 12 Australians today is employed in either a state, local government or federal public service.
As a former public servant, I hate the public service.
I think Campbell agrees with you. All right, as do I. Pauline, about Albonomics.
That's right. Look, he hasn't instilled any confidence in me to actually handle the purse strings of Australia, and especially he will not get control in his own right by the Labor Party. He will actually have to get in bed with the Greens to actually run government in this country. Now, the thing is, the Greens, they want to hand out a lot of money to the welfare recipients. They want to increase that. They want to actually increase the foreign aid that we give away to about 15% of our GDP. They want 50,000 refugees. So you've got to consider this. Where is the money going to come from? He will not be able to govern in his own right. So therefore, that tells me a lot that they cannot handle it. Howard and Costello were about the best to run the economy in the period of time they're in. And Howard handed over $20 billion to the Labor Party when Rudd won it. In the time that they were in, they ran up the debt. $250 billion under Labor, and the government, when they took over the coalition, they ran it up to just over $500 billion. Admittedly, because of COVID, it has increased it, but I think both sides need to pull their heads in and start realising, get rid of the debt for the future generations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. John, we've got John. Come on down, mate. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming along. What's your question for everyone here tonight?
Well, at the risk of being politically incorrect, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a question for the panel. Obviously, in front of us, we have 4 great Queenslanders. Is there any opportunity or chance of you combining your knowledge and forming one party, or at least becoming a coalition?
Why can't you all just become one big team? Bob Catter?
I put legislation forward, and I don't want to hold up too long, but a ban on the export of oil. So that we now are 30% self-sufficient in oil. Ban the export of oil. Number 2, all refuse is changed into diesel. I've got 12 people doing that in the Kennedy electorate. I'm sure there's 100 down here doing it now. The Germans did it in the last 2 years of the war. That will make us 30% self-sufficient in diesel by itself. Thirdly, and this is peculiar for me, electric cars for government vehicles in metropolitan areas only, not the Gold Coast. better put on the edge, and they're to be built in Australia by Australian-owned factories. The Australian people will own it. And finally, ethanol, which can supply 30 or 40% of our needs. The Americans are on 15%, the Brazilians are on 25, 30%. I mean, the answers are there right now for the things that you are asking.
So, Clive, why aren't you all one big party, and who would be the leader if you all were one big party?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be me, Paul, you know. But let me just say, before we answer that question, that there's been some confusion about preferences you asked before, but we're putting the Greens last everywhere, so that's for sure, right?
Clive, thanks, because I was shocked there for a moment.
Let's see how they go on the super team. Get together as a giant tag team.
When I was at the press club, I just said, they didn't show the full clip. I was having a go at an ABC reporter, which isn't a hard thing to do. I said, well, we'll probably follow the ABCs and preference the Greens. You know, that's how that build-up was, but the Greens are definitely last. I just say one thing that Bob just said for everybody. I had dinner with Joe Bjelke-Petersen the night his last day as Premier. He looked across the table at me and he said, well, Clive, we've built a lot of dams. He said, all they've got to do is do one more dam in the next 25 years and the state will be okay, right? And of course, they haven't done a dam since Joe was in power. But look, I just can't help but say I think everybody's in an unrealistic scenario. We're 1 minute away from a crisis. And that crisis is high interest rates. And you'll see the home loan rate go up to 6 and 8%. 80% of our people will lose their assets, lose their home, and what will become is a country full of slaves, economic slaves to foreign powers who have got more money. Yeah. So the government needs to move quickly, and our policy, of course, is to freeze home loan rates at below 3% for the next 5 years. And the government's got the power to do that under Section 51(13) of the Constitution. But that's what's important, that we protect Australians and protect the wealth that they've got. I've paid my house off, I'm okay. But I'm worried about the people in this country that haven't done that. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, well,
I'll just keep restating the question, and you can give whatever answer.
Well, I don't think anyone answered the question, including me. Let me just say this to you, that I've tried again and again to get, you know, all the disparate groups. Obviously, Nick Xenophon was the major person I was working on. Nick said he'd look at it after the state election, and he begged up badly in the state election. Of course, please God, he'll make a comeback. But I think that the question is the most important question in Australia. I don't share the view of a lot of people here. I don't think much will change, and that's a bad thing for Australia. It'll just keep going the way it's going, and as Clive said, you just go into more and more debt until you eventually become a sort of third world country. But so I would say this gentleman has raised the big elephant in the room, and I would say that I would be one that would be very, very anxious to work closely with the other parties.
Okay. Campbell and then Pauline.
And I'm 77 and won't be around for long, so I'd be...
come on, mate. Look, I hope he is. But anyway, look, I think the thing is this, that there is certainly a determination to cooperate. So, you know, there's not...
We do cooperate.
There will be cooperation.
We do.
There are policy differences, though. So, for example, I joined the Lib Dems because of their sort of particular philosophies and the like. So Clive just talked about that very pressing issue on interest rates, and it's there. Why is it there? It's because government is spending too much money during a boom. They engendered the boom due to the stuff they had to do during COVID, but they should have taken their foot off the accelerator. Similarly, I believe the RBA should have actually moved earlier with interest rates because inflation is now getting out of control. Our policy prescription is a bit different from Clive's. It says deal with the spending. So we're saying there should be cuts to federal government spending other than defence, and there should be tax cuts for Australian families, a 20% tax rate and a $40,000 tax-free threshold. So we're giving back people's money. So the point is that's how you then are able to afford the higher cost of living and the like, and we stop these inflationary pressures.
I'll ask for the fourth time. Pauline?
I will answer the question. The fact No, the question was, will we work together? I think I've proven that. I've got Mark Latham on board, and now I've got George Christensen to pull like-minded people from different ends of the spectrum. And actually, I have spoken previously to Campbell about joining the party, and I have spoken to Bob to work together, and that was years ago. So that has happened. And even Craig Kelly, I've asked Craig Kelly before he went to Clive Palmer's party to actually come on board, because these people like-minded with their policies. Yes, the policies are different, and especially with Campbell, all right? The Liberal Democrats' policy, and I've been strong on immigration coming into the country, because we cannot just bring anyone into the country. They must be like-minded, will blend in, assimilate into our society. But the Liberal Democrats have a policy that's open borders, whoever can pay for it to come to the country. Also, the fact is, yes, that was your policy. It was up there. I'm sorry. It's been taken down now, but I read it. But also, they also believe in privatisation of our services, which I'm totally opposed to. Important services should be owned and controlled by the government for the people, not for big businesses to come in and make profits out of it and charge a fortune to. So there's other things. Clive Palmer, okay, the fact is that, you know, I don't believe this, and it can't happen. This 3% for 5 years, it can't happen. It can't be legislated on. Well, that's not the truth that's been told, and that is not the truth. The thing is that for years and years, because I came out of fish and chip shop, I didn't have the brains to actually be in politics. All these men come along, all the would-bes, if they could be, that wanted to actually control me, put me out there, you get the sport, well, we know what to do. I can name them like that. But the fact is that I've done the hard bloody yards. I've hung in there, and I am still there fighting for the people of this nation to the best of my ability. I have no problem with working with anyone. I will work with the Labor Party. I will work with the Greens. I will work with the Liberal National Party as much as we can to benefit this country, and I will work with anyone here. But it is up to you, the people. You will decide at the next election who you want to represent you.
But Clive, about interest rates, I know I've got to get to a break, Sydney, but give me a second. Because these are private companies. There's a multiplicities of private companies. How can you tell a private company what it can and can't charge?
Well, up to about in the 90s, when Bob Hawke and Paul Keating changed interest rates, etc., being set by the RBA, they were set by the government. They have been the most years since the Constitution. They were done under Section 51(13) of the Constitution, which gives the power over banking to the Commonwealth. So the banks are responsible to the Commonwealth. So what we're saying is that we're facing a nuclear disaster. $1 trillion is a lot more than the $20 billion that I was complaining about Tony Abbott being a steer in 2013. $1 trillion will destroy this country, will just devastate us as a third world country. So we've got to protect our middle class. We've got to protect the people. This is an urgent time. So we've got to go back to the Constitution. We've got to pull out that banking power. We say that home loans in this country for 5 years are limited to 3% so people can survive. Otherwise, they'll lose their mortgages. No one's telling you what's really happening. So that's a crisis. I don't want to see... It's not just losing your home or your wealth.
Clive, it sounds good. You cannot legislate that in the Parliament.
Well, of course you can.
For the 3%.
Of course you can.
Underwrite it. You can't. The banks are actually on the
world
money market.
I'm not beholden to the banks,
Pauline. Are you going to underwrite it? You're worth the money. You
don't need to. It needs to go to the Constitution. And it's been done before in this country. Look at your Australian history.
1973, it was changed. The financial services changed.
Yeah, it was changed by an act of Parliament, and it can be changed again. Men and women have got us in this crisis, and we'll get ourselves out of it.
All right, thank you, guys. We're going to take a quick break. I appreciated the question at least. Thank you so much. Plenty more in a moment here on Paul Murray Live.
Paul Murray Live, proudly brought to you by Visi, turning your old bottles into new bottles.
Politicians think elections are about them. The truth is, elections are about you.
As we count down to May 21.
This election is incredibly important. There is so much at stake.
We'll cover every moment right here on Sky News.
An Australia that has a better future.
In election year 2022, we are
Sky News.
Sky News, Australia's election channel.
Only the United Australia Party can repay the $1 trillion of Liberal Labor debts with an iron ore export licence of 15%. Get the $1 trillion of debt repaid. Vote 1 United Australia Party.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
They are the superstars. The very best of the best. The legends. In the most exciting racing New South Wales has ever seen, the Greyhound Super Series presents the TAB $1 Million Chase.
Stay in control. Leave before you lose it. Gamble responsibly.
At Carpet Core, we're the experts in all things flooring. We're the experts in floor care, including the Quattro self-cleaning power mop and the Liectro robot vacuum cleaner. And that's why Carpet Core are
the experts in the trade.
It's the most exciting racing New South Wales has ever seen. The Greyhound Super Series presents the TAB $1 Million Chase.
Stay in control. Leave before you lose it. Gamble responsibly.
On now at Harvey Norman, get 60 months interest free. No deposit, no interest with 60 approximately equal monthly payments from Latitude. Shop our huge range of lounge and dining furniture, mattresses and bedroom furniture, computers and technology, TVs and entertainment, the latest appliances for your home and so much more. Everything you need for your home and lifestyle at Harvey Norman. Take advantage of 60 months interest free. No deposit, no interest with 60 approximately equal monthly payments from Latitude. Available now at Harvey Norman.
Go! What does it take to really help the environment? It takes investing in Australian recycling and remanufacturing, so we can turn old bottles into new bottles, and old boxes into new boxes. At Visi, we're investing another $2 billion to keep Australia's waste in the circular economy, helping halve landfills, lowering emissions, and creating green-collar manufacturing jobs in the process. Visi, for a better world.
Save your home. Maximum home loans below 3% for the next 5 years. Vote One United Australia Party and secure your family's future.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
I fear you have built me up in your might to be all manner of things I am not. And some that I am.
Gentleman Jack begins Wednesday, April 27 on Fox Showcase or watch on demand.
Welcome back here to the Benoa Tavern. We are on the Gold Coast. This is the Mavericks debate. Pauline Hanson with Pauline Hanson's One Nation, Campbell Newman with the Liberal Democrats, the Katter Australia Party's Bob Katter and the United Australia Party's Clive Palmer. Mark, you've got a question for the team.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Paul. Good evening, guys. My question relates to public infrastructure and assets, public assets. Over the past 25 years or so, I've seen the erosion and the sell-off by federal governments and state governments, but ports, infrastructure, rail, private companies, income-producing assets such as Qantas, CBA, Telstra, just to name a few. And it's Labor and Liberal, both parties. And these assets, as we know, were paid for by previous generations, taxpayers, and entrusted to the stewardship of the government of the day, not to be sold off to pay off debts. So my question is to you, firstly, do you have any plans in place or in your policies to, one, stop the sell-off of major infrastructure, as in ports, federal, I know you guys are federal, so ports, rail.
The ABC.
Secondly, any plans in place to reacquire or re-establish ownership by the federal government of critical infrastructure to the future of the country?
Thank you, mate. Pauline, we'll start with you about asset sell-offs.
Yeah, look, I've opposed this right from the very beginning, 1996, when I opposed the sale of Telstra at the time, and I said you had a $2.2 billion industry. Well, it wasn't an industry, it was asset-making industry that we had in Australia, and I said there would be a loss of 56,000 jobs, and I was spot on. Commonwealth Bank now is making about 10 billion profit a year. We've lost that. We see the infrastructure at the airports, they've sold off the whole lot, and then governments come in for that short period of time. There's no long-term vision anymore, so they come in and they sell it off, the short-term vision, and then they spend all the money, and then it's gone, and we've got nothing left. I brought up about when Adani mine was being bought. I spoke to Turnbull. I said, let's build the railway line for 360 kilometres of railway line.
Here.
For that, we would actually make about $1.2 billion a year. $2 of that would actually go to the maintenance. We would make profit out of it about 800 million a year. And you know what he said to me? He said, oh no, why would government have an asset like that when you can privatise it? And Matt Canavan got on the phone to me and he said exactly the same to me. They don't have this in their minds of actually assets. Water, electricity and gas and your defence and telecommunications should always be in the hands of government for the people, run at cost and not be in the hands of privatisation. I'm dead set on that.
Campbell, what's the Liberal Democrat position?
Well, I suppose I have to start by making the observation that, contrary to the way that the history has been written by certain people, my government actually didn't sell any assets. We took
And
to
you oppose the sale of the assets.
Well,
I want to say
you're being very kind, Bob. But
no, I'm on your side.
We took to an election the leasing of assets, of which I was pretty uncomfortable, I've got to say. But look, my view is a bit nuanced on this, and I'll try very quickly. I believe that certain things are natural monopolies and they should be owned by the people. And that's probably at odds with a number of my Liberal Democrat friends and colleagues. Having said that, just because they're owned by the public sector, so the transmission lines, it doesn't have to be that you have government employees doing that work. So owned by the community, but private sector contractors doing the work. That's my view. But there are things, for example, like power stations, that this government, this Labor government, have kept coal-fired power stations that they're philosophically against. They say they're going to shut them down. They could have been sold 5 years ago, got the money. What do they care? What do the Labor Party, I'm just pointing out the inconsistency. What do the Labor Party care about coal-fired power stations? But eventually they'll be worth absolutely nothing because they won't reinvest in them. So, yeah, if power stations themselves are not monopolies, poles and wires are, ports are natural monopolies as well. And I think there's a really strong public interest that the community keep control over those things.
Bob, asset sell-offs.
I think of all the things that set me into a fury, and you've seen me enrage on the television,
Absolutely.
is the sale of Australia. 6 of the 7 great mining companies in this country were owned by Australians. Now, 6 of the 7 are foreign-owned. Now, as far as the land goes, the biggest owner of land in Australia is a foreigner. The second biggest owner of land in Australia is a foreigner. The third biggest owner of land in Australia is a foreigner. I mean, what is wrong with us as a people that we don't rise up in rage against the Liberal Party and the Labor Party? It's not your asset. It was the people's asset. And we should have had a vote on whether you sold Qantas or whether you sold the Commonwealth Bank or whether you sold any of these assets. But the other thing was, this state was built on the government building those railway lines. And it was a chicken and the egg, because Thies said, you know, if you build a railway line, I can export coal, which I thought was quite mad. We were a coal importing country at the time. And of course the government said, well, we can't build a railway line until you've got a mine. So it's chicken and the egg. We've got copper string. The whole of the Northwest Mineral Province, maybe the biggest mineral province in the world, is collapsing because we simply can't pay the price of the electricity that we've been forced upon us. And the government will not build that line. I had a transmission line to build, exactly the same, between Normanton and Cairns. It took me about 15 minutes to take it to Cabinet. Cabinet unanimously agreed. We built it and we made a fortune out of it. Within 3 years, we were making a fortune out of it. And, I mean, yes, there are some things that should be run by private enterprise, but there are certain assets like airports and ports that should never be sold. The biggest coal port in the world, Newcastle, sold. The second biggest, Abbott Point, sold. I mean, what are you Australians or who are you? But you're not Australians. You're not Australians.
Clive, about assets and asset sell-off.
Well, I lost my membership in the Chairman's Club at Qantas. It's very important, this, Paul.
It's a badge of honour, is it? Badge of honour,
when our senators in the Senate stopped Qantas from being privatised, he threw me out of the Chairman's Lounge. So I felt the wrath of privatisation, believe me, right? But let me say, what this is about is control, right? Every day when I was in Parliament, I'd have lobbyists from one bank or another saying what assets we needed to privatise so they could get a nice big fat fee on. And what's happened to our country is it's been controlled now by the financial system overseas, And that's been the God all-important thing. And the same thing's going to happen with $1 trillion of debt. We'll all lose, you'll all be impoverished, you'll all lose any control about your country, and you won't be able to do anything about it. That's why it's so important. And that's why I'm banging the drum every day that we've got to use our iron ore assets to leverage it against the Chinese so we can do something about it. At the moment, I'm in the Supreme Court in Western Australia fighting the Chinese government because they're trying to take 200 square kilometres off us on our iron ore properties. But they haven't gone to the FIRB. They haven't even asked us for approval. They're just going straight to use Australian courts against Australians. The government's got to wake up, and we've got to protect our country like the Anzacs did in World War I and World War II.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our questioners. There were questions we didn't get to about everything from federal ICAC to more questions about preferences. But I want to close off tonight by giving you each 30 seconds to tell us core principles, the sales pitch, the manifesto, whatever it happens to be, but a 30-second final pitch. So, Campbell, I'll start with you.
Look, my pitch is this, that I've been a Premier, I've been a Lord Mayor, I've served my country in the Australian Army, I want to serve the people of Queensland once again. I never thought I'd get back into politics. I've been in business, running a successful business for the last 7 years, and I love my business life, but I can't stand and see what's happening to Australia. It's time for good people to put their hands up and get into it. I want to deal with inflation, interest rates, the cost of living pressures on people. I want to see dams and irrigation schemes built in Queensland. I want to see their Bruce Highway upgraded, telecommunications for people in the bush, and particularly important, flood mitigation dams for Brisbane and Ipswich, and also the inland rail being completed properly, going to Gladstone to create a major container port for the east coast of Australia.
Good stuff. Campbell Newman with the Liberal Democrats. Give him a round of applause. Bob Katter with Katter's Australia Party. The 30-second pitch. Let's go.
5% charge on everything coming into the country will give every pensioner in this country $100. And really, you're not going to feel 5% on everything coming into the country. Our farmers, they're up against 36% subsidy preference levels in every other country, and we have 5%. But that 5% will help income splitting so that Australian families can have kids. And honestly, you can bring the price of housing down. I had enough money to build 400 houses, and thanks to two of my blackfellow mates, cousins, brother cousins, thanks to them, we built over 2,000 houses with the money we had to build 400. So I want to use that superannuation money to build and create Australia. And I'm different than Clive and Campbell here. I'm not worried about spending the money so long as it's spent on a make money project instead of an absorb money project. And all the time it is absorb money projects to buy votes in the next election. Let's build our nation with that superannuation money, please, instead of sending it on a roulette wheel.
Bob Katter from Katter's Australia Party. We started with you, Clive, so we'll end with Pauline. Clive Palmer, the 30-second pitch.
Well, the United Australia Party's plan, of course, is that all housing loan rates should be capped at 3% for 5 years. We think we have to do that, exercise the government's control over that to protect Australia. We believe we need an export licence of 15% on all iron ore exports so that China, Japan and Korea repay Australia's $1 trillion debt. We can get back to where we were when John Howard left office. We think we have to bring back $1 trillion from North America and Europe to invest in this country so that we've got real growth and real capital. We can do that by legislation. But most importantly, we need a Bill of Rights to protect Australians against the overreach of government, right? Of course, we can repay our debt. We can increase the old age pension for $180 a fortnight for every pensioners, eliminate fringe benefits tax, eliminate the student debt and permanently freeze fuel excise. And that's what needs to happen to get the country going. The Australian government must bring rogue states into line. It's the Liberal and Labor's interest to divide this country, to divide our people, and we must realise that. And we've got to stick together and reassert our freedom and our independence so that Australians can be all that they can be. Vote for freedom forever, vote for one, the United Australia Party. There you go.
Clive Palmer from United Australia and Pauline Hanson. Ladies go last. The 30-second pitch.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, and tuning in tonight. Look, since I was first elected in 1996, you all know me. I don't take a backward step. What you see is what you get with me, and fighting for the Australian people. So there are some things I'm very passionate about, and family law is one of them, which I've got the inquiry up into family law, and I will not give up on that. And re-elected again, I will see that through, that changes will be made, especially with the child support system. Another big thing that's high on my agenda is about this COVID vaccine mandates that's been forced on people. No more. And I will fight that we do have a royal commission into it. Has been inquiry. Too many people, Australians, been thrown onto the scrap heap, lost their jobs. That is not fair. We have to stand up for our rights. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm very much for pro-choice. And I will not have a politician or a health official tell me what goes into my body and lie to me. So the fact is that there are many things. If I get back on the floor of Parliament with my colleague Malcolm Roberts, you know you're going to get someone who will question without fear or favour, hold them to account, look at the future of this nation, policies. The apprenticeship scheme was mine, stopping the buying up of land by the Singaporean government. That was One Nation that did that. We've done so much for the state of Queensland. We got the first hospice centre in Rockhampton, money for that. I got $190 million for the pipeline in Townsville. So there's so much more that I want to do. I'm passionate, I love this country, I love the people, and I'm so honoured, so truly honoured to be a representative for you on the floor of Parliament for the last 6 years. Please give me another 6.
Thank you, Pauline. Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you in the room. We'll take a quick break. The Greens are at the door, thumping it down. More in a second. Stop the...
Harvey Norman, everything you need in electrical, technology, furniture and bedding. Shop in-store and online today.
Only the United Australia Party can repay the $1 trillion of Liberal Labor debts with an iron ore export licence of 15%. Get the $1 trillion of debt repaid. Vote 1 United Australia Party.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
They are the superstars. The very best of the best. The legends. In the most exciting racing New South Wales has ever seen. The Greyhound Super Series presents the TAB $1 Million Chase.
Stay in control. Leave before you lose it. Gamble responsibly.
On now at Harvey Norman, great deals on technology. This light and compact Acer Aspire 3 laptop, huge value at just $398. Or get this HP portable powerhouse for $993 plus bonus $100 gift card. Save $20 on the HP OfficeJet Pro multifunction, now $228. Or get up to 2 years ink in the box with this HP Smart Tank multifunction, now $398. See your tech experts now at Harvey Norman.
What does it take to really help the environment? It takes investing in Australian recycling and remanufacturing, so we can turn old bottles into new bottles, and old boxes into new boxes. At Visy, we're investing another $2 billion to keep Australia's waste in the circular economy, helping halve landfills, lowering emissions, and creating green-collar manufacturing jobs in the process. Visy, for a better world.
The doers, the experts, the innovators, the game changers. They are out there, somewhere in the world, ready to join your team and take it to the next level. With Globalization Partners' full-stack global employment platform, we make it happen. Not in days, but right now. Fast and easy. The future of work is here. Globalization Partners makes it possible.
Don't miss your chance to win the $10 million Gold Coast Dream, an entire apartment complex only steps from North Kira Beach. Buy your $10 ticket today at rslrtunion.com.au.
It's the most exciting racing New South Wales has ever seen. The Greyhound Super Series presents the TAB $1 Million Chase.
Stay in control. Leave before you lose it. Gamble responsibly.
Save your home. Maximum home loans below 3% for the next 5 years. Vote One United Australia Party and secure your family's future.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.
Warm up the pokies at the Benoa Tavern. We'll be hitting them very shortly. Keep the round of applause going for Chris Jones, the editor of the Courier Mail, Gleeso, Mr Queensland for us at Sky News, and of course, Amanda Stoker for the LNP. One and all, hello. So, Gleeso, you helped put all this together.
Yes.
Are you surprised about how little fighting there actually was?
Well, I thought it was an historic evening because we basically saw the consummation of a new party. I think we're going to call it United Nation. Clive Palmer and, of course, Pauline Hanson. I think that they've pretty well come together, haven't they? But in all seriousness, the cannibalisation of the Conservative vote in this country is there on display tonight. You've got, performers who were outstanding, who will command votes. Clive Palmer spending a fortune. Pauline Hanson was on her A game tonight, I thought. And so, you're going to see a lot of Conservatives who will gravitate and particularly, go against the major political parties and vote for those particular candidates. And unfortunately, it is going to emasculate this particular young woman's vote here because, they are going to drag a lot of those votes to those particular parties.
Preference discipline saved the government last time. Yeah. Put simply, if 60% of people who vote for any of those four candidates that we had tonight, preference the Liberal Party number 2, ScoMo wins. Anything less than that, you will get the Labor Party as a government. They all seem to, in one way, shape or form, say that Albo would be worse, but there's still a question mark about preferences. That's that issue. Was there anything you wanted to respond to that was being suggested tonight?
Oh, look, I could go all night, but the first thing to say is that it is true preference discipline will matter a lot, particularly given it's now optional, preferential. And if people don't use up all of their preferences to the point at which they ultimately land with a major party, they face the reality that they could have their vote exhaust before they achieve any of the things that they wanted to. The other thing I'd add is that everyone came up here and said how frustrated they are with the major parties, how they fail to live up to the expectations of so many of the people in this room. And yet, if you vote for them, particularly in the Senate, you deprive the major parties of people who do share your views, like perhaps moi, who could make the major parties better. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. It's very easy to throw stones from the outside of the glass house. It's far more useful to you as a voter to have your say from within the room so that major parties are better rather than saying, they're all rubbish, let's all go and do something else.
Do you know what, though? I think what I saw tonight was why these maverick parties and candidates are so popular, because what they're talking about is stuff that actually matters to voters. Mm-hmm. And what people hear increasingly from the major parties is either nothing, in the case of one side, or, just sort of round the edges. Mm. And so I think that is your challenge as somebody who's sitting there, in that slot where you're gonna struggle to get in that in that position in the Senate, is you're up against these people who are making, I take your point, but they're making points that you just go, wow, that's a great idea, let's do that.
But also, I mean, Amanda, the Greens, of course, have perfected this for 20 years, right? Which is to be able to have one or two issues and run them home. I think these are more broader, smarter offerings than just the stuff that the Greens put out there. But you've got the teal independents on the left that just say it's only about two things, as if nothing else happens for 3 years. The reality of government is in 2019, nobody had a policy of how to deal with COVID. Yep. No one. But
and yet
you had to deal
Australia
with
ranked second in the world by the Johns Hopkins scale for pandemic preparedness and performance. You'd never know that to read a newspaper in Australia.
Yeah.
And so you're right.
We've reported that.
Well done.
but that's my point, which is not to rubbish
the candidates who you know are guests on the show, and I like them. I like them all personally. But it's about governing is complicated, and governing requires not just a set of principles to win over a room, but a skill set, and that's why I talk about the second preference, about number two mattering. That if you're just going to sort of go via 13 different options, well, then eventually somebody who doesn't have any idea how it actually works gets empowered, Gleeso.
I think also, too, China was a resounding theme tonight. I think you'll find that, you know, a khaki election is very much part and parcel of what's going on right now. I think Australians, particularly the so-called quiet Australians, are privately very, very concerned at what's going on, and we've seen with the Solomon Islands and the way in which they've kowtowed to the Chinese that it's a real issue. And these guys, the four that we had on the stage earlier tonight, they tap into that sentiment. And that's why they are so popular, because they talk about things that you and I and others are talking about at barbecues.
Well, but also, when I talk about potential prime ministers, I want you to think about this. You have, in Scott Morrison, somebody who's backing in Catherine Deves versus Albo, who can't stand up to the mean girls.
Yes.
That's your choice.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty easy choice, right?
That's your choice,
It's
right?
a pretty easy choice.
Yeah. So, again, finally, Amanda, to the people of Queensland, give me the 30-second pitch and take 7.5 minutes to answer it.
But the choice people have is between a government that has a plan for making the economy strong, that has proven it knows what it's doing with the economy, even through difficult times, and is prepared to make the investments necessary to keep Australia safe in a world that is less certain and less secure than it has been for a very long time. In contrast, you look at Labor, they've already overspent massively just on the promises they've made so far. The pandemic would have been $80 billion more expensive to Australians had Labor been in power. And you've got a person from the last Labor government that cut defence spending to its lowest level since 1938. In terms of picking a government for our time, it's a pretty easy choice once we delve to the details. The risk we face in, for instance, the Senate debate, though, is that people might be taken by a glib policy like that from the UAP that says your mortgage will never be more than 3%. Well, hold on. How does that happen? Are you going to re-politicise the Reserve Bank? Are you going to cause the sovereign risk that means capital disappears from this country? Good luck getting a home loan, let alone it being under 3%. And so those sorts of knock-on consequences really need to be contemplated when you just see a glib headline.
She took me up on the 7 minutes.
Yeah, correct, and I'm fine with that, because everyone else did. Why not? We're out of time. We're taking time off Rita Panahi, which I appreciate her being very patient with. But can we all agree? This is way better than whatever's going to happen tomorrow night. But tomorrow night, the Leaders' Debate will be here on Sky News. Thank you very much, Chris Gleeso, Senator Amanda Stoker for the LNP. God love you people. Thank you for watching Paul Murray Live. Thank you for supporting Sky News. Rita is now.
Live on Sky News Australia, The Rita Panahi Show.
Welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, we'll take a look at the wacky policies of the Greens and why they are a clear and present danger to Australia's future. I'll be joined by AFL great Kevin Sheedy on Veterans Affairs and energy expert Alex Epstein on the cost of Labor's energy grid transformation. And we'll find out why Christina Keneally is so cranky.
These are Anne Rutten because the government thinks that the age pension is welfare. Understand this.
But first, today there were jubilant scenes in airports and on planes across America after the absurd mask mandate was lifted thanks to Judge Catherine Kimball Mizell. She ruled that the federal mask mandate exceeded the authority of the CDC, which failed to justify the order and didn't follow proper rulemaking procedures. It wasn't long before every major airline dropped their mandatory mask rules and passengers and airline crews celebrated in unison.
April 18th, the Biden administration announced that the Transportation Security Administration will no longer enforce the federal mandate requiring masks in all U.S. airports and on-board aircraft. Effective immediately, masks are optional for all airport employees, crew members, and customers inside U.S. airports and on board.
Now, US airlines have been campaigning for the mask mandate to be lifted for some months. But what are our airlines doing? Why aren't Qantas and Virgin, which love a little political grandstanding, not making any noise about these mandates which directly impact their business and their clients? Now to the upcoming election, which isn't really a choice between the Liberal and Labor parties. It's a choice between a Liberal National Coalition and a Labor Greens coalition. Labor may not be in a formal alliance with the Greens, but they are very much reliant on the far-left party of simpletons and socialists. Labor cannot win without Greens preferences and will struggle to pass legislation without the votes of Green senators in the upper house. In the event of a hung parliament, Labor will need the Greens to form government, or the fake independents who may as well be in the Greens. For too long, the party that attracts around 1 in 10 votes has been treated as an oddity, a nuisance, rather than a genuine threat. But the Greens will wield significant power if Labor prevails in next month's federal election.